Alright, YouTube, there are a pair of links in the description this time because there's an interesting interplay going on between Russia and NATO right now. NATO, of course, has deployed a new anti-missile system, not brand spanking new, but it's deploying it in Romania, and I believe they're also planning to put one in Poland. It's a more sophisticated system than we've been using in this particular region. The Chinese apparently are fucking terrified of it. I'm not sure why, because it's an anti-missile system. It's not meant to attack targets. Meanwhile, the Russians are preparing to update their nuclear arsenal with a new type of missile, the Satan II. Now, the Satan missile was infamous because it's this fucking enormous ass missile that carries multiple 3 megaton warheads. It's essentially capable of decimating an extremely large area. You would think it would be if it were launched at the United States, a couple of them would basically kill everybody in an area the size of Texas. So it's certainly the most sophisticated weapon in the nuclear arsenals of the world today, at least size-wise, at least as far as the punch that it packs. The Satan II is going to be about as good as it gets. It's also a stealthier missile that sort of makes our radar systems somewhat outdated. I'm not sure about some of the newer systems, but the standard stuff just isn't going to cut it. The Chinese are also working not on stealth missiles, but on much faster missiles as well. So you still do have the same stuff that went on during Cold War 1.0. We're in Cold War 2.0, or the continuation, the reheating of the Cold War now. And a lot of people don't even fully, I guess, realize that this is going on. They think that it should be par for the course, that because the Soviet Union is gone, Russia's just rust bucket potato patch, and so we don't have any grand chessboard anymore. But as long as there are at least 2 nations on Earth with a single nuke apiece, you still have mutually assured destruction. The many thousands that exist in the arsenals of the United States and Russia ensure that that grand chessboard is still there. There's the rivalry, the competition is still there. Now, this is good news for military technology. What you end up having is that non-aligned states get fucked because the United States and its closer allies share this technology together and are working forward to try to end the grand chessboard, to end mutually assured destruction. Russia and its allies are doing the same, somewhat in partnership with China. They're now a player as well, sort of a third wheel, a lesser player, kind of aligned with the Russians, but not always, kind of a neutral party, but not completely, certainly an economic competitor to both states at this point. And then you have some of the lesser nuclear states that really they have to suck the dick of the greater nuclear powers. India and Pakistan constantly have problems. Pakistan's sort of a U.S. satellite, really, at this point, sort of reliant upon billions in handouts. India increasingly is getting drawn into the West. Hopefully we can broker a solution there, because that's probably the worst possible flashpoint that we have in the world today. Now, if you think Kim Jong-un is scary, he's got maybe a half a dozen really tiny warhead, designs. They may not even go off properly. We're not sure about exactly what their stockpile constitutes. Though we know the Pakistanis and the Indians both have at least small, decent-sized stockpiles that they can use to utterly obliterate one another out of existence. So you kind of got to prevent what could happen there. That'd be probably more catastrophic than China going at it with somebody, even with larger weapons. We're talking really crude systems that are a lot dirtier in the case of these lesser powers often. But Russia, make no mistake, is still moving towards modernizing its systems. They were going to modernize other aspects of their military. They updated their tanks, and that's not fully deployed, but it will be. The Armada tank is a next-generation tank, a good one. Perhaps not as good as a Leopard, but certainly on par with the tanks that we're using. They've sort of tried to modernize their naval forces, but not really. They sort of ran out of money. I guess they turned to their missile systems again and decided that the tanks were all well enough and the Navy can suffer for a while longer. China's mostly focused on their missiles. And then the United States has a different solution. We've once again turned to air and naval power, the same projective force we've been working on in the past, as well as anti-missile technology. And all things considered, my bets are on the anti-missile systems being what finally brings MAD to its knees. It finally knocks the grand chessboard kilter. Because what will happen, I've spoken of this, it's not that you need a nuclear system capable of decimating your foe. It's going to be far more difficult to develop such a thing. What you have to develop to make MAD break down is a system that can reliably destroy the enemy's nuclear deterrent, and then fully deploy it, preferably without them noticing that you're doing so. I personally believe that it's a mistake for the Western world to even really announce when it's doing these things. It should have a program by which similar systems can be mass manufactured, preferably energy weapons, literally anti-missile systems working with lasers. We do have the technology now. It's still fairly new, but it's being refined as we speak. These should be deployed all around such foes to completely contain them, so that there's no hope of any of their nukes getting through. At that point, it doesn't really matter how big and bad and ugly their nuclear stockpile is, because they're no longer really capable of using it unless they want most of the nuclear ash to fall back on their own state. However, if this happens, the amount of fallout released, of course, will still create a shroud around the world that will poison and sicken potentially hundreds of millions of people. The problem with the grand chessboard is there is no solution to it. De-escalation will not occur. There will never be a full drawdown of nuclear weapons in this world. The only way in which MAD truly ends is with a nuclear war. What the results of that war are and what form it takes are yet to be determined. It depends on what technology is developed. But you can look at these two links, and you'll see the Russians are foaming at the mouth with anger that this system is being deployed in Eastern Europe. Now, NATO uses the excuse, oh, it's to counter Iran. It's not to counter Iran. Make no mistake, the Russians are correct when they surmise it's to counter their own nuclear arsenal, spurred on by the fact that they've been talking about developing this next generation missile system for some time now, and now are actually going to try to prototype it. Whether it's successful or not, I guess, remains to be seen, but they're certainly trying to test the system. And so NATO naturally is going to be more interested in anti-missile systems, not to get rid of the Russians' nuclear deterrent entirely, but to keep the balance in that part of the world. And both sides will try to convince their people that the other side are like barbarians. I mean, this is old stuff. This has been happening since the fucking 1950s anyway. So it's essentially situation normal all fucked up. It's not like this is new. The eastern and western parts of the world have been doing this for a long time, since before I was born, since before most of you were born, certainly since all of you were little babies or fucking toddlers. I can't imagine that there's anyone who's 100 on this fucking channel. If there is, then happy birthday, I suppose, to you. But the Aegis offshore system is a deterrent to Russia in a way, and Russia's increase in their nuclear capabilities certainly as well. The Satan II missile doesn't have to be used as a nuclear system, but let's face it, that's what it's for. It's essentially replaced the old aging Satan I missile that is really intimidating, but I'm not even sure half of those missiles have been well maintained enough at this point to even fucking fire. We've probably got plenty of nukes in our own arsenal that wouldn't even be fully operational. We've got a lot on hold that can be brought online, but are sort of not actually fully readied. But I mean, are half of those even properly maintained? Who knows? It's not like the average person can walk into a nuclear storage facility and take stock of the situation and look for rust and signs of wear and tear and like missing computer chips and stuff like that. So we don't even exactly know, I think, our own nation's full capabilities. The Russians don't know, the Russian people don't know their own government's full capabilities. I mean, both sides could have like new technology they're not even talking about because it's so secretive. In the case of the United States, you can bet it's almost certainly something to do with the Air Force or some sort of energy weapons platform, which they've already been testing. And the test was a success. They managed to mount essentially an energy weapon on a naval vessel and destroy a target some miles away with it quite accurately. Again, in its infancy, the main problem is energy production. If they solve that problem, then we're in the era of laser warfare. Things are going to look a lot more advanced than they currently are. But yeah, The Cold War did not go away simply because the USSR fell. The nukes are still there. Some of that stockpile was destroyed. However, there are still many thousands of nuclear weapons there. They're being modernized. The Russians are modernizing their tanks. The only advantage that it brings to this world is a massive increase in technology related to the military and every possible civilian application of that technology once adapted to another purpose. You would think of drones. It's all fielded by the military, but now look, there are all sorts of sports enthusiasts that are flying their little drones around. They're being used for scientific applications and so forth. You would look at some of the propulsion technologies, naval technology, aerospace, literally everything, even the concept of like laser weapons. There's one YouTube channel, I can't remember the YouTuber, who built some sort of weird laser weapon that it looks fairly powerful to me. I have to wear goggles to even fucking use it. It's like 4 fairly large green lasers mounted on one platform, and you can actually like pop balloons with it and do all sorts of other weird stuff. I heard about one person who, as a joke, ignited somebody's bedroom curtains with a green laser, simply out of spite because they were having a loud party or some shit like that. I'm sure it's been done. It's possible to do. People are using, especially the more advanced green lasers, as opposed to the old red ones that they used to have back in the 90s that people thought were really funny. They use them to blind police during protests. There have unfortunately been times they've tried to blind airline pilots when they're taking off or landing, which is about the most stupid fucking thing you can possibly do, because you almost certainly are going to get caught and thrown in the gulag. But all these things, they do have civilian applications, and then sometimes civilian advances end up military applications. But it's all part of the Cold War. This competition wouldn't exist. In a non-nuclear world, this sort of advance wouldn't actually be happening. It adds to everything: computers, aerospace, again, as I mentioned, vehicles, energy production, energy retention, battery systems, and so forth. Literally everything. So you can thank, in a weird, ironic way, the same technology that will probably bring mankind to its knees, at least temporarily, is making our lives arguably better. That's about all. Peace out.